Hello, Star Citizens, and welcome to another day of Invictus Launch Week 2955 or 2025 if you're not following 930 years in the future. Don't forget, every day that we do this, we are trying to give away something. Well, we're not giving something away every day, but we're giving away something this month. So make sure you like, dislike, leave a comment, and make sure you subscribe to make sure you qualify to get our MTC that we're giving away this month. Yeah, let's just jump straight into it. Tumbril, land systems, and then we'll go to Crusader. Of course, we'll do the CCUs at the end. We start out with the Cyclone AA, which honestly, I'm not a huge fan of the Cyclone AA, but not because it is a bad vehicle. Let me tell you why. This is why I am not a fan of the Cyclone AA. Obviously, the Cyclone AA is more geared to directly take out threats, like it says, from above. However, the Cyclone MT can take out both ground and air-based threats. So that is why I prefer the MT. Now, you shouldn't be trying in something as small as a cyclone to really destroy whatever's in the air. You're supposed to be trying to either disable it or get it to fly off course so that you can either get away or protect your people. Whereas this one is more so meant to try to destroy whatever's up there. However, don't understand why this one's 80 and this one's 75. So the Cyclone MT is the one that I'm going to get 9 out of 10 times unless I have that very specific purpose of wanting something that is very, very agile as a vehicle and wanting to take stuff out of the air. So I get it for that very specific purpose, but like I said, 9 times out of 10, most people should be getting the Cyclone MT. It's one of the greatest vehicles in the game, if you ask me. Now, the Cyclone RN is very unique because it is one of the very few, if not, it might be the only dedicated recon vehicle in the entire game. So I don't know what you're gonna need that for yet, but I can imagine with Valacar coming into the game soon that you're going to need the RN, or at least it'll be better to have the RN if you're trying to find out where the Valacar are underground. You know, those the largest Valacar, which I believe are the Apex Valacar. So yeah, because you have to do a whole lot of driving around to disturb the ground and stuff like that, perhaps the Cyclone RN will like let you know what's underground. And I can imagine it being useful for like mining ventures and stuff like that in the future as well, trying to detect where new caves are, things like that. And of course, for troop movements and things like that, of course, you know, seeing how many people are in that cave or in that bunker, maybe if you get close enough, I can imagine those being some use cases for the RN. So it's in a category of its own. Right now, I probably would only get a CCU to it or an upgrade to it. I wouldn't buy it outright, but I can understand if some people have this in the fleet. The Cyclone TR, however, is not one that I would purchase. Out of all of the ones that I witnessed, I think this is the least likely for me to purchase. And the only reason I say that is, yes, it does have a full turret that can spin around and everything, right? And I totally get why people would like that. But because of what this thing is meant to do, I would rather just have the base Tumbril if this thing is slower, because you're not going to get off any shots, in my opinion, you're not going to get off any solid quality shots with the TR if you're going at that high speed anyway. So you're better off either having the MT and going full on, hey, I'm gonna aim at you, I'm gonna take you out, and having that anti-air option than just having the TR, which only can shoot the one gun, even though it does give you that 360 degrees of control. So yes, I get why the TR exists, but it's another one of those 9 out of 10 things where 9 out of 10 people are going to need that MT or the base Cyclone, and the TR is only for that 1 out of 10 person. The Nova. I'm a huge proponent of the Nova tank, I think, or the Tonk, my bad, excuse me. I'm acting like a newbie. It's the Nova Tonk. Yes, that's the way we say it. So the Nova Tonk, I'm a huge proponent of this. I think it's going to end up being a lot better than what people make it out to be now. And I think the only reason it doesn't get that type of fanfare is because I still think it needs, not a rework, but I think it needs some balancing. So I think it's either going to get faster, or its maneuverability is going to get better, or its speed is going to get better. Like something's going to get better with the Nova Tonk as we get closer. Because if it doesn't, then everybody will abandon it and it will have been created for no reason. So I do think that it will get better. It has anti-air, it has anti-personnel, It's got that size 5 bespoke weapon on the front. It can fit 3 people in it. It is an amazing vehicle. It's not that fast, but it's fast enough to where it's better than walking, better than being in one of those ATLS machines. And it's not going to be better than most vehicles. However, it is decent enough to get you where you need to go and not really worry about whether somebody's shooting at you. Now, I think that, again, in the future, ground combat is going to be much more intensive, and I think it's going to require a lot more planning. And I think things like the Tonk are what's going to be like, if you see one of these and it pops out of a ship, you're going to want to run for cover. And I think that's where this thing is headed. I don't think it's there yet, but I do think that's where it's headed. It's one of my top 5 vehicles in the game. Then the Storm. Okay, so we can do the Storm and the Storm AA together, which I believe are the last 2 vehicles. So the Storm AA, these are vehicles that I think still require a little bit more balancing. So the Storm AA needs to be able to shoot its entire, one of these entire squares. So if you can see me here, there is, if you look, there's 4 blocks here. So you have this block here, which has, I believe, 16 size 1s. Then you have the next block, which has 4 size 2s. And then you have the next block, which has 4 size 2s. And then the next block, which has 16 size 1s. So what I'm saying is you should be able to fire, at the very least, an entire row of each one of these, so it should be at least 4 size 1s, so that would be like the entire top row here on this square, or at least 2 size 2s. You should be able to fire those at the same time, or at least in very quick succession, like 1, 2, right? Or 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't have a Storm AA to test this out, but I do plan on testing it. So let me know in the comments if you can do that. But as far as I remember from when I reviewed the Storm AA, I could not do that. So it is very possible that has changed since my review. My review, I think, was a year ago. So it's very possible that it's changed, but if it can't do that, it loses its capacity a little bit to me. But even with the ability to do that, I still think the Storm AA I think the Storm and the Storm AA both need some adjustments. I think they need to be a little bit faster than they currently are, and I think that they really need to lean into that transformer ability and really be able to handle rocks and objects in the way that a little better. I think they both need to be able to do that. I think they should be like the super fast moving tank that scares the crap out of people because it looks like a Metal Gear from Metal Gear Solid, if you know what that is. So I think these things should be a lot faster than they currently are, especially because they're single person operated. And yeah, I like the Storm better right now than I like the Storm AA. I think they both should actually be the same price. I'm a little confused as to why the Storm AA is more expensive. I think this is the better option right now. I'd rather have a Ballista right now or a Nova Tonk than I would a Storm AA. However, this one's a little bit more unique in that it's a much tougher, it's a much faster tank with a weapon that I can see is useful for both anti-armor and for anti-personnel. So yeah, I think the Storm is the one to get here, but I also think both of them need a little bit of work before I can suggest getting either one. They are still doing this stuff, which, yeah, we'll just skip right over that. And then we'll go back up top. All right, let's go to Crusader Industries. All right, we got 8 here. All right, so the A1 Spirit is for people who want to get into bombing but don't want to spend $750 on an A2. Not to mention, even if you get the A2 at a very cheap price, I think the lowest I've ever seen anybody get the A2 for is $190, which is insane. It takes a long time to do that and a lot of saving of CCUs and stuff. Even if you get the A1 Spirit at like $100, if you manage to pull that off, I think that's the lowest I've ever seen anybody get it. No, it's $110, I think, is the lowest I've ever seen anybody get the A1 Spirit for. You can see the difference, right? So if you can play the long game to get your A2, I think it's better to get the A2 in the long run if you don't mind large ships. But if you do mind large ships, or if you don't want to play the long game, the A1 Spirit is going to be a solid ship for you. Again, it's a light bomber. It doesn't have the same amount of options as something like the A2, but again, it's a third of the price, right? So you can imagine people taking the A1 out specifically as a defensive measure to attack ground troops that are coming towards your base or something like that, or to lighten the ground troops when you are attacking a base, right? So you go over, drop a few bombs in the front, lighten up the ground troops so that your vehicle forces can go in and you don't have to worry about it. Now, what I want to see more of with the bombers is I want to see more bombers able to take out anti-air stuff. So I want bombers to be specifically geared in a way where they're more difficult to see by anti-air. And the reason I want that to be the case is because I think that's kind of the purpose. Like if I have a light bomber, and maybe this should only apply to stealth bombers and not all bombers, but I would say the entire point of bombers is to attack the ground. So why wouldn't they have some type of special shielding from things that are anti-air, right? Now, don't get me wrong, anti-air is also meant to take out bombers. So it's like a give and take. But I think right now we are heavily on the side of anti-air having the edge over the light bomber. And I think it should be 50-50. I think it should be fair and fair. I think A1 should have a 50% chance and the anti-air should have a 50% chance. And I think it should require some configuration. It should require some skill to get to that 50%. But I do think that that's the way it should be. And I just don't think that's where it is right now. But I do think the A1 is a good ship. I wouldn't pay the full 200 for it. So make sure you get an upgrade to get to it. But I don't think you'll be upset with it. The A2, as I was just talking about earlier, it's $750, so I can 100% understand why people would be hesitant to get this. I didn't pay $750. I wouldn't suggest anybody pay $750. The most I would say anybody should pay for it is $500. But it can carry the biggest vehicles in the game. It can drop bombs if you want it, whether it's carpet bombing or a massive Moab. And it is a absolutely excellent multi-crew ship where you can fight in this thing. However, you do need a good pilot because the pilot has to be able to keep those guns that are kind of underslung, needs to be able to keep those guns on target. And that's one of the more difficult things for it to do, is keep those guns on target. Not to mention, even if you have one of those super large, vehicles inside, you can put a few Furies in this thing and have some fighter support. Like, it is a really great ship, and I do think the price has kind of I think the price of it has kind of made it seem like it's way too expensive, and it is too expensive, but you do get a lot for what you pay for. I just think you probably should do some work to try to make sure you're not spending full price to get the A2. That's the only thing I would say about it. I think you can get a solid price for this is $500, $550. If you're getting $200 plus off of this, I think you're paying about what it's worth. You could do better if you take a year or two to stack up those CCUs or upgrades. But yeah, I think the A2 is a solid ship. I don't think anybody who gets one and keeps one for the long haul, because it doesn't quite have everything that it needs yet. If you keep one for the long haul, I think you'll be satisfied in the long run. The Aries Inferno. So I always do the Aries Inferno and the Aries Ion together. The Aries Inferno and the Aries Ion are peas in a pod. I don't think anybody should have one without having the other, or at least having somebody else in their group, their fleet, their org that doesn't have the other, because I do think these ships are uniquely built to work together. One is getting the shields down and one is attacking the hull. And I think as long as both of them are actively shooting at something, that thing is going to go down very quickly. That doesn't mean you can't use them alone. However, I do think they work better as a team. So if you don't know anybody else with the other one, there's other ships that you can get in the heavy fighter range that I think are going to be better equipped for you. However, these have had a recent kind of update where they've got a little bit of their skills back. However, not quite enough for me to say that they're worth spending $250 on, unless, again, you are in that specific space where you have both of them, or you know someone else that has one of the other ones, so that you can use them in tandem. Because right now, I think honestly, I wish they had larger missile stores, torpedo level. I wish they had like a few torpedoes on them or something. And then I might be a little bit, or even like a massive store of size 4s, and I think it would make it a little bit more capital ship killer-esque for me. But right now, without that, I still think they're a little overpriced, but like I said, there's that specific use case for them. All right, the C1 Spirit. So the C1 Spirit is probably one of the best, if not the single best, daily driver that there is as far as price. So I think the Starlancer TAC is actually the greatest that exists currently in the game right now because of everything that it has on it. But it is a massive ship, and it also costs, I think, $375 now. So because of the cost of that, the C1 Spirit is still a massive value. Now, another contestant in this category would be the Zeus ES. However, the Zeus ES doesn't have the guns that this does and doesn't have the flight profile this has. So I can understand why some people might say Zeus ES, but I would go C1 Spirit because it's $125. Most of the time you can get it for less than $100. If you just take a few months of waiting, you can probably get this thing for 90. I think most commonly I see people getting it for $90 as like saving a decent amount of money. And for $90, this ship is a steal. It can do what, if I'm not mistaken, I think it can do 64 SCU of cargo. I'm not 100% sure on the amount of cargo it can do. I think it's 64. And then so it can do a little bit of cargo. Not to mention, you have it can fly decent. It's tough. It's got nice weaponry on it to where you can defend yourself. It's not a fighter, obviously, but it's a great all-around ship, and they say versatile, and I think that they nailed it with the C1 Spirit, and it has some really cool skins as well. So C1 Spirit is a definite go if you're on the fence about it. All right, the C2 and the M2. Now, the C2 is kind of in a limbo state because I used to think the C2 was this really amazing ship, and I still think it's good. I just wonder now, why would I get a C2 when something like the, I don't know, I mean, because again, it's $400. I don't know why I would get a C2 instead of getting an Ironclad, right? Now, the Ironclad base cannot fit tanks, so I get that, right? $50 more, and all you can do is take cargo and vehicles smaller than a tank. However, the Assault can take tanks. The Ironclad Assault can take tanks. Now, the Ironclad Assault is $135 more, so I can understand why people would be like, I just don't want to pay that much. But I also question, like, if you have $400 to spend on a ship that is specifically meant to carry ground vehicles and has the capability of carrying cargo, why not wait, save up some money, and just get the king of that in this price range? And I think the Ironclad Assault is going to end up being the king in this price range, right? Now, I do think there are more expensive ships that will be able to do it better than the Ironclad and the Ironclad Assault. That being said, I don't think the price to value margin is going to be the same. I think as far as the value of what you get out of an Ironclad or an Ironclad Assault, I think that's just going to be better. And it's the same thing for the M2. I don't know why I wouldn't get an Ironclad Assault instead of the M2, because again, not only can I carry more cargo, I can carry more cargo, and I can fit the same amount of tanks, actually more tanks on that thing. Now, here's the argument for the Crusader series, the M2 and the C2. These are smaller ships than the Ironclad, so they're going to have a better flight profile, which means better maneuverability. They're going to be faster. So if you specifically need your ship to be a little faster and have a little bit better maneuverability, and you want to be able to move ground vehicles and have a little bit of combat ability, I can understand. But I still think that, I wouldn't say it's a 9 out of 10 situation. I'd say it's more closer to an 8 out of 10 situation. So about 20% of people are going to need that specific type of flight profile for their, their ship in this category. But I think the other 8 out of 10 people should probably be looking at an ironclad or ironclad assault. If you're not interested in Drake, because I know there's some people that don't like Drake. I don't know why. No, I do know why. But I'm a huge fan of the ironclad and ironclad assault. But I can understand some people being hesitant with Drake. So I would also say, why not look at a Liberator? Because now you're opening it up to the same amount of people required to fly it, right? You only need one person to be able to fly a Liberator. I still would suggest you get a full crew for all of these, but 3 people in a Liberator versus 3 people in a C2, I'm gonna take the Liberator every time. But the Liberator is even more expensive. It's $575. But now, not only can you take large ground vehicles, but now you can move ships. So now you got all of your bases covered and you got a full carrier. However, if you don't, that one's not going to be as capable as fighting as these 2 either. So you're still going to have questions, and I get that. So it really just depends on what you need your flight profile to be. My argument is that if I need to move a bunch of large ground vehicles, I'm not going to be doing that alone. I will have fighters with me because I'm not going to take the risk that I get attacked with all that cargo on board. Especially when it's vehicles and stuff like that. So I'm always going to have flight control with me, which is why I don't need my ship at that price range to be super maneuverable. If I wanted to take that chance, I would probably get a 600i, rent a 600i, whatever. I would get a 600i, well, I guess after the rework, because the 600i is going to be able to fit any singular vehicle on it. And so I'd rather just put a tank on the 600i, use the 600i to transport it, but the 600i is more expensive than this. So I already own a 600i, so I guess that's why I'm specifically not worried about it. But I see, again, I see a use for the C2, I see a use for the M2. However, I think you're better off with either the ironclads or you're better off with the Liberator. And if you really, really need one of these 2, I would go with the C2, because the C2 is at least in the right price range. I think the M2 is overpriced, and I think it's overpriced by a significant amount. I think the M2 should be $475, and if it was $475, I think they would sell a lot more of these. That being said, you can get the M2 with massive discounts. You can get this thing for $300. You can get, but at the same time, you can get this thing for $250. So it's still gonna be, even when you play the upgrade game, I still think the M2, unless you specifically love the Hercules, I really wouldn't get the M2. I would either get the C2. If I'm already spending $520, I could spend $15 more and get an ironclad assault. There's no way I'm getting an M2 right now. These 2, they need something added to them in order for me to justify spending that much money on them. And more specifically, the M2 needs that. I would love if Crusader Industries either included a vehicle with these, included just something with these, right? So I can imagine them including, a cyclone, or including, a pulse or something, just something, I think, to make it worthwhile, I think. The C2, less so, but the M2, definitely. I think if they just included something with it, I think it would be okay. I can't justify the M2. I can justify the C2 at least in that 20% range, of people who need it instead of an ironclad. All right, enough about those 2. Let's talk about the king of Crusader. And you don't have to think it's the king, but it is. It is the king of Crusader. Now, you might look at these ships and be like, the A1, definitely not. The A2, maybe, but mostly because of cost. The Aries, no. The Ion, no. The C1, that one you might be putting up there as the king. But you know why it's not the king? You know why the C1 is not the king? Because people don't fight over the C1 the same way they fight over the Mercury. The Mercury was the beginning of the this ship is better than your ship type of thing as far as non-combat ships. And I think the Mercury is still, it manages to claw its way back into the minds of all participants of Star Citizen in one way or another. Whether it's, I would rather have a Mercury than, or it's, the Mercury's a pretty good ship for A, B, and C, whereas this other ship is good, but it's not quite as good as the Mercury at A, B, and C. Now, the biggest flaw of the Mercury is the amount of doors and no secondary entry, right? It has 4 doors, I think, from entry all the way to getting to the cockpit. And if it had a cockpit entry, which we are supposed to be getting, that would pretty much cease to exist. But another issue with the Mercury is, like I said, the doors and the entry. But another issue with the Mercury is that its gameplay isn't in the game yet. So a lot of what you're doing with the Mercury right now is you are just using it for cargo storage. But one of the things I like about the Mercury is in that back area where it, I believe, carries like 114 SU of cargo. In the back area, there's enough space where you can put an Atlas back there, because this thing doesn't have a traditional tractor beam. So because it doesn't have a tractor beam, you could fit an Atlas in there, and that Atlas doesn't take up any cargo space. You can fit an Atlas, you can fit multiple Atlas in there, and you can fit a Pulse, all without taking up your cargo space, and still have 114 SU of cargo space. Not to mention, you can also, this thing is one of the faster ships in the medium space. I do think they nerfed the speed a little bit, and I hope that the speed on the Mercury comes back, because I do think that was one of the key reasons why the Mercury was so popular. So I hope that when the balancing is all said and done, the Mercury gets a little bit more of a speed boost than it currently has. But that being said, it's a great all-arounder if you want to have a ship that is speedy, can carry a little bit of cargo, but also has a third purpose, which is its primary purpose of being a data distribution kind of ship. Not to mention it has all those secret compartments, underneath the ship, which I wonder about how good those will be in the end game, but at the same time, I think they'll find a way to make them useful. I don't think it'll be useless. So this might end up being one of the better smuggling ships. Maybe those areas underneath will be shielded. Maybe they'll add some more entryways to that, to where even if your ship is being searched by somebody, maybe there's a way to like hide it in a way that people can't see it, or access it, grab it, take it, put it somewhere else. I do think this will end up being one of the better smuggling ships. So there is a lot of different reasons to get the Mercury. I love the way it looks. I think some people said it looks like one of those unique mouses, like that you can put your hand on, and it's more shaped towards your hand, like an ergonomic mouse. So I see that, but I also still think it looks awesome, especially with that Night Runner skin. So that is it for the ships. Let's go and look at the CCUs, because I do think this one is okay. So it's the Aries Inferno. So it's $235, and you can get the Scorpius Antares. So 5 for 15. That is a W for CCUs, because you spend $5, you get 15. That's about 75%. So that is a good CCU, not a great one. We want 80% is where they get into great. Like this is I say good is anywhere from 70% to 80 or below 80%, and then 80% and up is great. And if you can get those, I think the most I've ever seen is the 87% discount on a CCU. I think it was 87 if I'm not mistaken. But if you get those are once in a blue moon, type of CCUs. Now, another part of this, don't forget there's still some other CCUs. You still have the Guardian MX CCU, which I might have forgot to mention before. So this is $20. I think it's 10 for 20, so that's not great. It's not good. It's okay. And then oh wait, I already did the Guardian MX. Yeah, I think that was it. Oh no, the TAC. So the TAC one, $35. And I think you pay 10 for 35, which is good, not great. So it's, it's a little bit in between there, but yeah. So I'd today's CCU is good, but not great. if you add them all up together, I'd say we have 2 good ones, 1 okay one, and then the rest are trash. So far, it's been a mediocre event as far as CCUs. That being said, I'm okay with that. I don't think every day necessarily needs to have great CCUs, but we do need at least one great CCU. We need one 80% CCU to make it all worthwhile, right? And I was hoping that it would actually be the A2 because I'm actually I don't have my A2 right now because I restarted the chain to get back to it. So I do need one of those, but the biggest one outside of that one was also I needed that MISC Prospectors CCU, which I think a lot of us are waiting on, and that one didn't come either. So I'm hoping that IAE we get that. So it's not a big deal. We'll get it. I think we'll get it this year, and I'm not in any rush to get to those ships that I'm waiting on those CCUs for. But that is it for Invictus Day 7. So it'll be the same stuff tomorrow. I'll just check in just to see if there's any CCUs or anything, but I don't think there will be. But yeah, that's it. Thanks for spending your time with us. Thanks for watching. Shout out to the members. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.